required. Much easier to do it at the time of launch of NTS rather than try to amend the FAIRS system 6 to 12 months after launch. And like WRC is in close contact with the NTS team over technical implementation of this project. So rest assured that we're working with the NTS team at NZTA over this. Regional public transport plan as well. So reviewing the FAIRS policy was an action arising from the 2024 long-term plan. So it's a committed activity as part of the long-term plan. NZTA guidance for RP2Ps is that fare structure reviews undertaken at least every 6 years to make sure that they're current and relevant. Current RP2P adopted in 2022. And there would need to be a variation to the RP2P if some elements of the FAIRS review were to be implemented ahead of implementation with NTS. So FAIRS review, we completed the issues and options paper today with the WRC Transport Committee, and as I said, hopefully get your direction on preferred overall policy mix to go into to take forward to the WRC PT subcommittee, who then would hopefully provide a recommendation on the policy components. So just in terms of where we are, really hoping to get this process wrapped up by the end of the year. WRC has an agreement with the NTS team that needs to get this review signed and submitted to NZTA quite promptly after council endorsement. So just a bit of background. Public transport funding, the proportion of fares revenue, as I'm sure you won't be too surprised to hear, is quite a small proportion of costs. And I'm telling you this for context, really. The importance of fare revenue as a revenue source is significant, but it is quite small compared to the overall level of public transport in New Zealand. WRC really not too different from other regional councils or public transport authorities in New Zealand in terms of the revenue proportion derived from fare revenue. The national legislative context, this is a little bit dry, so I'll try and skip through this. But there is a national legislative framework for which RP2Ps are reviewed. There's some objectives in the LTMA at the moment for requirements, and that's a bit of a hangover from the last Labour government, who put more of an emphasis on affordability, mode shift, equity, etc. But there's also the GPS, government policy statement on land transport, which produced by the current government. And that puts much greater emphasis on private share cost recovery, so trying to get that proportion of fare revenue up as a total. We just note there that when the GPS was written, the intention there wasn't necessarily for fares to increase, but for the proportion of fares as relative to cost to increase. So there's a lot of different ways that can be achieved without necessarily blanket fare increases, and there's a cost side to that equation as well, of course. Also note the national concessions. So your off-peak super gold, all of your statutory schemes, like Community Connect, which is 50% off for community service card holders, are schemes that are funded nationally. Any concession schemes that are above and beyond that are regional policy choices, and these are funded by the region. There's no national pot of money for funding those schemes. So a few things that will change with NTS. Customers are going to be able to benefit from open loop ticketing systems. So those of you who perhaps used the system in Auckland or in many international cities will know that you can just simply tag on and tag off with your debit card. There's no need for a pre-purchased B card that you load money onto, though that will still be available as an option for customers who want that. Under current RPTP policy, cash fares with Motomove would be phased out in favour of being able to any payment method. The idea being that it's a lot easier to pay if you haven't got a prepaid card for travel. There's also been a bit of a move to review concessions amongst PTAs to move towards a more consistent approach. So I said earlier that the various regions are able to fund concessions out of their own budgets. A lot of PTAs have chosen to do that across the country, but in very different ways. And there's quite a lot of inconsistency at the moment between PTAs. I know the Minister, Chris Bishop, has made his views known on this, and that he'd like to see some more consistency between PTAs in terms of what their concession offers are. So I'll talk a bit about that as well.
Andy, I've got one question. Did you want to take that now?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Councillor Nicol.
It was just, I really like consistency around the country, but is there, from your comments before, we haven't really touched on international best practice. I was just wondering if you had any reflections or comments on that, because we're obviously all over the place in the country, but fairly similar enough on the portion of user contribution. Is there anything you want to say about kind of what you've seen elsewhere in the world that works well, that New Zealand would benefit from, that we can keep in mind as we
look in terms of what works well? There's a huge variation internationally in fare systems, the way people are charged, how people are charged. It really comes down to what objectives you're trying to achieve. And what I want to tease out of this session is what the objectives are that you're looking to steer council policy on fares towards. I wouldn't say I would hesitate to say that there's best practice, but I think avoiding. There's some principles such as trying to keep things as simple as possible, not overcomplicating things. You want a system that users are able to understand. You want a system that's broadly reflective of costs, but beyond that, it comes down to what your preferences are in terms of outcomes.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Andy, you say we do this review once every 6 years. Is that correct?
That's what NZTA guidance.
Yeah. So it's a 6-year process. So whatever we decide endures for the next 6 years.
In theory, there's no reason why council can't undertake another fares review in 3 years. But, I mean, it's not. Obviously, you don't want to change things about too much for customers.
You said that we're not concerned about the level of fares and budgets. right? To me, that's what this is all about. We know that we have to align with the NZTA targets, right? We're currently sitting less than half of what those targets are. All I'm interested in is how we're going to get there and how quickly we're going to get there. That should determine our policy. And honestly, from what I can see, it's fit for purpose. It's worked for the last however many years since it was last reviewed. I'm more concerned about meeting those targets, and that's all that matters. So I really want to hear about that, please.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Just one minor point about the charging, whether it's wiping out the use of cashless society sort of thing. People would have a concern with that, or what they can. What is it? A situation where people say buy tickets, but with cash, if they don't have a banking history, bank cards, or what have you.
Yeah, so the removal of cash on buses is current RPTP policy. For this review, I have assumed that policy will not change. There are some good reasons for removing cash from buses. It's more efficient in terms of people boarding. Drivers don't have to worry about finding change and things like that. And also from a safety point of view, having on that's safer. Look, I can't speak to the decision for putting that policy in the previous RPTP, but those are the two main reasons for removing cash from buses.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Just on that point, at the district, we went through this exercise of absolutely cashless council, libraries, anything, and there was an outcry, but the reality was it was safer for everybody. And I think there's many companies that are moving towards cashless. So I think we just have to get on board and get with the plan. So my question is, if you've got the Move, whatever it's called, Motor Move card, if you use credit cards or otherwise, is it going to be a different cost? So is it the same cost whether you use any type of card?
It'll be the same cost.
So then there's no incentive to get a Motor Move card, just use your credit card or whatever. So that's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's more for, say, if you're putting your children on the bus and they don't have a debit card, then you would get them the Motor Move card.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah,
I mean,
it's good to know. Thanks.
There's other options as well that you'll be able to quite often when you go to international cities, you'll see people just tapping on with their mobile phone, and they'll have a mobile wallet attached to that as well. So there's lots of options.
Thank you. Yep, no, good points. Andy, if we can move it along.
So like I said at the start, this is a workshop to develop fares policy. The RPTP, Regional Public Transport Plan, is the document that sets the objectives and policies for public transport across the region. All public transport plans contain a section of varying extents for setting out fare policies, and it's an important part of public transport policy.
So just sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I wonder, taking on Chris's point before, is can you tell us what's not working with the current policy that needs review? Because as I see it, like Chris, that the current policy is reasonably okay. You know, I'm looking to hear what's not working and what you want us to look at addressing. You know, I don't want to steal your thunder or whatever, but it's cutting to the chase. You know, what's wrong, and what do you want us to do about it, please? So I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but
No, thank you.
No, I'll try and get to the issues as quickly as possible, but this is important context in terms of council's role and responsibilities in terms of their settings. So I'll just try and get through this as quickly as possible, if that's okay. So the RPTPs, so they set out some principles for fare setting and review. They don't specify fare levels themselves. So this is an important point when we're talking about revenue, because an RPTP in itself will not allow you to undertake a revenue calculation. Fare levels themselves are set through other council processes such as plan, etc. They describe fare products at a high level. The current RPTP has policies in relation to some concessionary fare products, for example. They also define how people will be charged in relation to how far they travel and where they're traveling. What the LTMA doesn't require RPTPs to do is, as I said, set exact dollar values for individual fares or describe every fare product in detail. So there is a degree of operational flexibility that councils have operating under an RPTP. I'll summarise this very quickly with a view to get into the issues as quickly as possible. But essentially, any change to fares policy will need a variation to the RPTP. To implement a fares policy may require a change might require a variation to be approved, but any opportunities for quick wins, so minor adjustment to fares levels within the existing framework. So some things that are currently in the RPTP. There are some Waikato specific fare products which are quite important. So accessibility concession and +1.
And Chair,
Yep.
unlike normally when we have a PowerPoint, we haven't seen it. This has been in our agenda. We've read the agenda. Can we take it as read and move to what we're discussing?
Yep. So I think we're working through the issues, but Andy, did you? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Can we just jump to what's not working?
Yep. I'll skip through very quickly. So it's got policies relating to transition to NTS, zonal fare system, free transfers and fare capping. And just in terms of what's happened since.
Oh, yeah, we've paused and Andy is carrying on. If we keep stopping for questions, we can't get any flow. So it's that balance between stopping for questions and getting to what we want to get to.
Yeah, all I'm advocating is we go through it, but as quick as you can. Yeah.
As a new councillor, he's asking for
Yeah.
that everybody's not being reused.
And I'll back it as well. I'd like to go through it, but quickly.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. So in terms of what's changed, and this really sets up the discussion for the issues that might be perceived with the existing fare structure. So the cost of delivering the same level of public transport has increased quite a lot over that time. We've had quite a bit of change in terms of the national concession regimes. The Labour government, previous Labour government, created a couple of new concessions and then they got removed by national. There's much greater emphasis now on cost recovery from public transport as well. And that's and fares were frozen during COVID as well, so that they were kept, you could say, sort of artificially low during that period. But there's been a big jump in fares over the past couple of years by 30-odd%. And last week as well, importantly, fare structure for Te Huia Council voted on a 25% increase for Te Huia fares, which, as marked a significant departure from the existing sort of regional fair structure as well. In terms of patronage, it is quite hard to know how that those 30% odd fare increases have affected patronage, but we know that roughly for every 10% of fares increase for those that pay them, about 3.5% fewer passengers use the bus. The regional patronage figures are somewhat masked by quite significant improvements to patronage on the Waipa services, and also changes to the Meteor and others as well. So it is a difficult picture, but the international evidence suggests that it's good international evidence from multiple countries that you put fares up by a certain percentage, then patronage will fall by a corresponding amount. So fares go up by 10%, demand falls by 3.5%. That's okay. So in terms of policy trade-offs, and I talked a bit about this, look, it depends how you want to take this forward, depends on the outcomes. So everything is a trade-off with fare setting. If you have a certain amount of revenue, this could be the amount of revenue that's needed to meet the agreed targets within NZTA. You're trading off to, for example, between trying to get the most amount of passengers out of that amount of revenue, or providing concessions for more concessions for certain groups. So there's an equity perspective there. For the purposes of this review, treating revenue as a constant, but needing the baseline is sort of meeting those agreed NZTA targets and getting that revenue share up.
I'll just pause there. Councillor Raymer.
I'm happy to wait to the end. I was just queuing up, but if you want to carry on, you want me to open now?
Go for it.
Okay. The assumption that you've raised around patronage and revenue, strikes me when I read the whole paper. It's loaded on cost of fare costs and everything else, and I'm just wondering if that's a fair assumption. It seems to be a massive generalisation that that's actually a strong correlation there. Could it be service, could be other things, because I would have thought there'd been a whole lot of things driving patronage, not just the cost of the fare. So yeah, so just give me a bit of rationale into that logic.
Sure. Look, there are, I mean, like you say, there are a lot of different things that are driving patronage. That's not just the cost of use, it's service levels, it's the way the services are designed, etc., etc. For the purposes of this fares policy review, I'm obviously not looking at those things. I'm just looking at the extent to which fares will affect different outcomes, be it greater equity for certain groups or increasing patronage in certain areas. And look, the evidence on the relationship between fares and demand is very, very well established in the international literature. It's based on many international studies, and it's also based on recommendations from NZTA with regards to modelling of demand and forecasting as well. So there is a very strong correlation between fares and patronage, but it's important to know that there is a lot going on there, and the way that fares are structured, as much as the absolute level of fares themselves, is an important point, and one that is dealt with through this fares policy review as well.
it doesn't appear to be supported by your own documentation. You know, when you look at some of the runs that are increasing and everything else, so they've had the same fare increases and everything else, and so our own data, council data, doesn't seem to be supporting that argument. So, you know, I really think that there's a few things going on here, but one is it's got to be around service. There's other associated costs, you know. So I suppose the point I really want to make is I don't believe for a minute that fares are the key limiting factor, and going forward when we look at the information here, will be a key part of you know, a lot of other aspects of it that go. So I just don't see enough evidence to say that it's fares only.
Okay. So you meaning like reliability, frequency, bus priority, that sort of thing? The cost to drive your own car.
100% right. You know, and we talk about it here. We talk about fuel costs and everything else, and that going and driving people on. So, you know, there's more than one aspect, and so it's not our own fare recovery, and it's the relationship of all that, and so there's a lot going into it, and the document seems to be focusing on fare cost.
Yeah, I guess because that's the scope that's for today's workshop is fare. So we always hold those other things in the back of our mind as well. But I think the point for today is that we're focusing on the fares policy and just understanding where we've come from and where perhaps we want to get to. So again, it's just that broad direction that we're looking for today, but appreciate your thoughts on that as well. I've got Noel, Keith, Jen and Chris.
Yes, can we go back to the previous slide, John? So just on the policies, bottom right-hand side, we've got concessions for certain groups, children, pensioners, mobility issues. I just want to explore something, and I'm not necessarily promoting it, but I ask why we have those concessions. Children, I understand because there's government mandates and that, and the debate was what age is a child, but there's a lot of expense put into modifying buses to accommodate wheelchairs and the likes. So there's expense there. But the cost of the journey from A to B and B to C or A to C is the same per passenger. So I would like to understand why the fares are not consistently the same because of the considerations that are already invested with infrastructure and buses, in particular, leaving Tahuya aside, that the cost of transporting from A to B is the same per passenger, having made those adjustments to the buses. Yeah. So not all, this suggests that there either is an inability to pay or that they're special. And I'm not saying that they're not special, everyone's special. But is it appropriate that the fares remain concessions for particular groups where it costs the same transport? So
yeah, I guess you'd throw Super Gold in the mix with that as well,
yeah,
wouldn't you?
I don't have a problem.
I believe when you look at the accessibility one in particular, then you need to look at the savings that we make on the total mobility scheme when people choose to take the bus instead of taking the subsidised taxi, which for a lot of users, they might take the bus, say, to the supermarket for on the accessibility concession, and then use the total mobility to actually get home with their groceries. So it's actually saving the council money when
it's the ratepayers, it's not council, it's the ratepayers.
Well, it's the community.
Yeah.
So that whole package of looking at things, not just in isolation, is really important for that group of users.
I wouldn't like you to cut the subject off right now, but I'd like it, you know, that we actually consider it. Do we actually want those concessions to be in place, and why? So I don't have a problem whichever way it falls. The issue is I'm asking the question, is it appropriate for concessions to be just rolled over ad infinitum?
No, and I think that's part of the discussion, which is on the table further in the pack as well. But I'll let Andy, have you got anything to add, or Catherine?
No, I was just going to thank you and say, yes, we're getting to that discussion, and that's exactly what we here to discuss today, is the policies that underline this.
Keith.
Yeah. Thanks, Angela, and thanks, Andy. I've just, in terms of that diagram you got there. I've got a few questions, but getting back to the concessions, I share a concern about concessions for school goods. I live out of Hamilton, and we are subsidising school goods come to Hamilton schools, which makes it very unfair for the local schools. So I think it's weight to Noel's comments about should we give concessions, because it actually also creates some bizarre behaviour. So that's if you put that back into an education thing. We've got three things that I'm struggling with, and part of it is obviously because I don't know the background. I don't know what the entitlements are and that sort of thing. So a fuel charge mechanism, for me, it should be instantaneous, because at the moment we've got high cost of running cars, and it comes down to the graph you gave there of fares and that sort of thing. The date was the January 2026, whereas we should really have that information now. I think we'd find quite a big difference in terms of the information, but fuel charge needs to be reflected instantaneously. And in the bottom right hand corner there, social equity, I'm struggling with that a little bit, because I know the outlying areas like Te Kuiti, Otaronga, South Waikato, Coromandel, they are disadvantaged. So we put a massive subsidy, I think it was 84% in terms of your graph earlier, one of your diagrams earlier. Shouldn't we consider loading that to make sure that all people are treated equally, particularly the lower socio-economic people? And I'm really concerned about the opportunity for schooling, obviously, but health and even shopping and all those sort of things. I don't know what the government requires of us, but if we're putting an 84% subsidy in there, I think there's some more room to look after those that are disadvantaged, not only by their social status, but also their distance status, which is a major. And the other one I'm a bit grumpy about, and because I have a gold card, I'm as guilty as any. I don't think the gold card people should have the same access to peak loading as other people, but I don't know what the law says. But I'm saying if they want to go peak loading, they should pay for it and push the off peak as their privileged time, not peak loading. So those are my queries at this stage, Andy.
Good points, Keith. Thank you. Jen.
Sorry, Keith, I disagree with almost everything, but I did like what Gary said about focusing on all aspects to make this all work together. My question though is, well, I've got two. One's a bit facetious. It's like, what does NZTA want? Because they control almost everything else in this space. I'll leave that there. That was just for fun. The second one was, the real one is, how can we stay agile and keep reflecting that good cost recovery, that one in the blue one, while the cost of living keeps changing? So I've always wanted data on what does it cost to take your car and what does it cost to take the bus. But I've never quite seen it in our reports in that way, because it's changing quite rapidly, and we set our fares now, thankfully, finally at annual kind of reviews. We don't let it lag for too many years, but how can we build that in, that we're moving with the times in that aspect? Because I'm happy to maximize some user contribution, but I always want it to be maximizing the passengers and therefore being always cheaper than using your car, kind of thing. So I just don't want those two things to get out of whack. At no point should it be more expensive than using a car, for example. Yeah. So that's something like, how do we keep that in mind in the future? probably something for Phil to take away. Is that right?
Noted, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Councillor Hughes.
Madam Chair, look, I just want to circle back to the point Barry raised earlier on. We're fixated on fares. The big part of this equation, to me, is cost. Yes, your costs, then the fares will, and we're just not talking about that, and I don't know when we're going to. To me, that is the critical part of this whole equation, because what we're doing is taking the costs, putting a fare recovery against it. We know we have to get to 35 to 40%. That's a private share contribution. And I just don't, we're just not talking about it. And that to me is where we should be heading. That's a discussion that I want to have.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I guess the big driver at the moment is diesel. So our move to electric buses was going to be a huge lever in reducing our costs over the total cost of the contracts, but we've chosen to go slow on that one. So yeah, anything to add, Phil?
Gary was going to jump in as
well. Going to electric by itself doesn't reduce the cost. You know, there's a cost of capital and there's a cost recovery associated with that. So, you know, that won't be a freebie, will it? You know,
Yeah, capex would be total cost over the contract.
Yeah. So more broadly, the regional policy, the regional public transport plan, which council adopted in 2022, sets out some aspirational levels of service for different types of routes in different locations. Much of that led into the work that we did in 2023 and 2024, 24 and 25, around the network reviews, and then the package of routes that we've been working with council on over the last 12 months or so that's currently out for tender is all based on a level of service. Effectively, it's a hours of the day, frequency of service, over what areas model, and that's all out in the market currently. So you've been doing that in the conversations we've been having with you since the middle of last year. But that's how it gets set currently. Just a reflection, sorry, also on Keith's comment about fuel. We've talked at the Transport Committee about NZTA setting the indexation costs, and NZTA previously applying those quarterly. We've updated you in the fortnightly updates you've been getting around fuel and patronage that they have now moved to monthly indexation. But that's not to say that's about making the supplier whole effectively. The role of fares in that is something that regions across the country have resisted currently, and have said that fare reviews occur annually, and that Auckland, Wellington, and currently ourselves adjust those fares far less frequently than the cost of the trip changes. And I think that's the topic that you were raising there, Keith.
Thank you. Warren.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things that are being thrown around. If you can give me clarity, please, Phil, is one, what is the conditions of a gold card? So my understanding is they pay full price if it's peak times, they get discounted, and it's actually subsidised by the government. So can you just give me clarity?
SuperGold is a central government initiative, and anybody over the age of 65 is entitled to that card.
Yes, I'm too young to know.
The rules of that card are that passengers can travel for free off peak, which is outside the peak hours, Monday to Friday, and all day Saturday and Sunday for free. And there is a process of claiming a bulk representation of those costs from NZTA on a monthly and an annual basis. Yep. This region has an additional regionally funded subsidy, which is that SuperGold can travel for free on all services all day, every day. So we as a region are picking up the cost of those free trips for those SuperGold users, for those bus morning and afternoon free trips. The Tahuia, after the 2024 conversations 2-year review, that subsidy was reduced so that SuperGold effectively aligns with the national rules.
So our, then, just for clarity, so our individual rules and the free trips you're explaining to us are completely free and are not subsidised by that bulk funding for Gold Card at all. Is that what you're telling me?
So yes, so the regional
Right.
rate is picking up that cost when the government isn't funding that piece.
Okay, so it's coming out from the regional ratepayers rather than the government's bulk Gold Card funding. Thank you for that clarity. Secondly, if you could clarify for me, please, we're hearing GPS, fare box recovery, public share figures being thrown around. Can you confirm for me what they are? Whether they're a target, whether that, and with the election cycle changing very shortly, there's obviously another GPS going to come out early next year, I take it. So if you can give me an idea on timing.
So the government policy statement that was released by the national government following the elections identified cost recovery via private share as being a factor that they wanted NZTA and councils to focus on. Sometime after that, there was a guidance note issued by NZTA that set out the way that would work. And at the beginning of that process, there was talk about every region having really quite aspirational targets. I don't think there was ever a national target. There was then, as a result of a lot of feedback from regional councils across the country, a backing off of that by government. And that led to the negotiation of an individual regional target, let's use the word, of which we have secured that. And we brought that to council several times along the path of those negotiations. That is, and I touched on this when we met as a council last week. NZTA and the minister want to see regions moving to increase private share. They want to see regions moving towards the numbers that have been agreed. They do not require us to achieve those numbers, but they want to see us progressing in that direction annually when we review our fare structures. And that's,
so can you give it, so the bottom line is, can you give me those numbers? Because
they're in your
people are
slides.
different, talking at
Yep.
different.
they're in your slides coming up shortly.
Yep, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we've got that clarity.
So in the first year of those, we did achieve them. In the second year of those, where we are now, we are achieving those. And the proposals for fare increases
Figures that are
for
in there,
next
right.
year are about achieving
That's,
next year.
that's the clarity I want to thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's probably half of what's been stated. So
Yeah, and that's what
15%,
that's where I was getting to.
18% rather than 40%.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Keith.
Yeah, I'm concerned when we talk about fare recovery and that sort of thing, that and it's not picking on you, Angela, but you talked about diesel versus petrol electric buses. The bigger issue is the infrastructure we've got, and you know, it took me 3/4 of an hour longer to come into town today because of just congestion. And so while we talk about the actual cost of running the buses, what we're not taking into account is the infrastructure, where the bus lanes, and are we at a point when we should be taking some of the cost of running the buses from the people who are bringing the cars into town as a toll? Because I think we desperately need to, you know, we can survive today, but this carries on another 10 years of population increase. We've got to do something seriously, and that cost needs to be weighed into it. You know, if we can't get it from central government, we have to look at it locally.
Yeah, you raised some good points, and park and ride, especially on the outskirts of the city, congestion charging. Those are topics that have been talked about through RTC, Future Proof, that kind of thing. So yeah, they are live discussions, especially with the TA partners who provide the infrastructure.
Would it be worth asking Catherine just to mention the MSP corridor work that's been going on?
Yes, please.
Yes, and I guess I'll just reiterate what was alluded to earlier, is that there are numerous levers to driving patronage and improving public transport services. Fares is not the only one. We have a regional public transport plan that covers various different aspects, from fares, but to also comms and marketing and what we can do in that space to improve it, as well as what our key corridors are and things like that. There are wider projects like the Metro Spatial Plan, where we are working closely with our territorial authorities in the space to have, bus rapid transit lines, bus priority and things like that, that actively support the transition to more reliable, more frequent, more rapid buses and transit. So it's difficult to ignore those within this conversation. But I guess it's trying to remain within the boundaries of we are only looking at the fares in this capacity and what the policies are that sit behind the fares and what the council and what the elected members' decisions are with regards to who gets concessions and at what time of days, and do we want to shift towards maximizing patronage or align more in the middle. So, and again, that's also why it's difficult to to have that without necessarily the figures as well and the actual fare prices. But like we said, we don't have the fare prices within the regional public transport plan. It's the tariffs and the policies that sit behind the fares, which is a different discussion. So yes, multiple things at play, and I agree that it's difficult to separate them all sometimes, but just try to remain within scope. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Catherine. I've got two more and then we'll move on. Chris.
Thanks. Just in response to our chair's questions, I'll just read from this paper that I've got here. Waikato's negotiated targets do not reach the 24.1% baseline 26-27. They peak at 18.4%, which is 6 percentage points lower. The national target for 26-27 is 27.1, and the NZA TA's board indicative range for 26-27 was 35-40%. So
where's that from, Chris?
That's straight out of the policy documents.
Or
and this is from using AI, doing search on all the information that's available in the public arena. So happy to share this with you, Madam Chair.
So is that from NZTA website or
yes,
the source?
It's just using all the available information that's out there.
Yeah, I think the key missing point is the negotiated targets agreed between regional councils and NZTA. But I think we can just leave it, park it there. Maybe we can take it offline because we need to move on. Gary, did you have anything extra to add?
No, not a lot to add, but I think the point that I'd hope that this workshop goes to is what is NZTA aspirations or what they want and what negotiate and how we do that. So that's what I was hoping that we'd be discussing here at this workshop. Yeah,
and that's to Jen's points before. But
so maybe just to answer that is the government policy statement on land transport is due imminently. It is usually released in draft form in May, following the budget, and we would expect that to be the case this time. The Regional Transport Committee does provide a submission to that process every 3 years. Whether they are ready to release that document yet, and what it will say about fares and private share, we don't know. So we're waiting for that document to be released, and we had hoped that we would be able to discuss it at Regional Transport Committee on the 8th of June, but there's nothing to discuss at this point. So we'll keep you informed as soon as we get a sense of where government wants to go on that.
Thank you. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you. So I'll carry on. Look, in terms of the existing fares policy, did quite a comprehensive review of what's working well and what's not. I'll start by saying in terms of what's working well, the existing fare structure the Waikato has is pretty good. It's probably more of a case of needing some evolution rather than revolution. There's a free transfer window which is pretty well utilised, and this relates particularly well to the future network as well. So with some of the MSP work that's been done and the network structure that's set out in the RPTP currently, lots more emphasis on fast, direct, frequent routes which generate patronage. But with that type of network comes less coverage. So people perhaps in some instances needing to make a a change of service, so not having a single seat journey from A to B, but two faster, more frequent routes instead of one more long-winded, slower route. Another thing that I found was that broadly fares are set proportional to costs. You travel a further distance, you pay more. There are some notable exceptions to that, which I'll explore later. There could be some room for improvement on that. Also, concession agreements with partners. So WRC has done quite a lot of work in working with partner organisations. For example, WinTech over the years, and that means that those organisations will subsidise the cost of fares for their staff to the tune of usually about 50%, and that supports patronage and revenue for WRC, as well as providing staff benefits for those organisations as well. So three kind of broad areas that I'll talk to you about in terms of where there might be some opportunities for improvements. The first is meeting private share revenue targets. So the conversation that I want to have with you is not about whether we should meet those private share revenue targets, but how are they met and what are the trade-offs in doing so. Optimization of the tariff structure. So as I said on the last slide, there might be some opportunities for where things could be done slightly differently in terms of defining zone boundaries, etc. And also, thirdly, concessions and fare capping. So there's probably quite a bit of thought that I'd like your feedback today on in terms of what should the concessionary fares arrangement be going forward, and is fare capping still an appropriate mechanism for when we launch NTS and beyond. So I'll skip through this, but essentially targets have been agreed with NZTA for increasing private share revenue. The default position amongst many councils to that has been just to put up fares. The problem with just putting up fares is that it affects the portion of users who actually pay the most for services already. So those are your adult passengers typically. That's the group that you could expect to see the biggest reduction in demand from if implementing just blanket fare increases as opposed to a more potentially more targeted approach. Fewer commuters on buses is generally not good for the health of the system going forward. Fewer passengers means that there's less revenue and passengers to justify services. Those passengers are driving instead. More cars on the road means buses are travelling slower, and that means higher operating costs as well. There's a bit of a loop there in terms of policy decisions that are made now versus the outcomes they get in the long term. So in terms of the targets, talked about this earlier. So the agreed targets on the slide there, 13.3% 24-25, 15.6 25-26, rising to 18.4 in 26-27. And the question for the policy review is that WRC is committed to meeting those targets through existing resolutions. The question is how those targets are met and what the balance of that policy mix is that you saw on that previous slide between concessions for various groups versus fare increases.
Andy, just on that one, so private share includes such things as advertising on buses?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
It also includes things like the cafe revenue from Te Huia and revenue that's gained from working with partners such as higher education institutes over over partner concession products.
Okay. So there could be that could be a good lever to pull in the cost of living crisis for big employers to subsidise potentially their workers and travelling on public transport.
Absolutely, yeah.
Jen, did you have a question?
Yeah, but I'm trying to stay on topic. It just bugs me that it's we're trying to, just thinking out loud, push the boundaries of how high you can make that contribution, because that's what NZTA asks for. But at some point the patronage drops off. The lever for getting increased patronage, to Gary's point, is to make the service better, which is again in fully NZTA control with its 3-yearly decision on what it funds. So I'm just worried that there's no one out there, including us, and central government with its draft GPS, which we saw last time, a few times, you know, it swings very heavily either way, depending on Labour or National's inclinations, that we're not using a holistic view to make this really work for everybody. And because it's largely NZTA controlled, but in these disjointed ways. And so I just hope at this point, but I would love for us to get it as right as we can in those constraints. I don't think there's a question in there. I'm just trying to make it make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess taking on board what's been discussed already is that sweet spot between bus services that are frequent, reliable, and meet the needs of users while also getting a fair private share target.
Yeah, and very
That's well.
limited ability to trial things to see. We are very much, I think, trying our best, all being here and contributing.
Cool. Good points. Thank you. Catherine, did you have anything to add? Or?
So yeah, as I think Phil mentioned earlier, WIC exceeded the 24-25 target by a reasonable margin, and this patient the 25-26 target be met as well. And council is committed to working towards those fare box recovery targets as well. Sorry, private share targets. So I mean, again, I think probably there's been a reasonable amount of feedback on this already, but I did have a question just to prompt some feedback, just in terms of how comfortable councillors are with continuing to rely on uniform fare increases to meet revenue expectations. So I don't know if there's any further feedback that wishes to give on that.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Downard online. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just thank you, Madam Chair. Just to go back onto that increase where you made it in the 24-25 year from 13.3 to 15.2, that didn't deter the passengers, didn't it? Our numbers never went down.
So I mean, as I said earlier on in the presentation, it's quite difficult to tell from the patronage figures what extent that fare increases have reduced.
Okay, so I'll put it a different way. What was our revenue? Did that increase?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question is.
So our revenue, that increased, didn't it? By that 15.2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you met the target. So obviously, whether you did drop off patronages or anything like that, you still met the target. So, you know, what we're talking about is, you know, how much to increase to how much we lose patronages. So it doesn't look like that you've lost too many patronages or revenue less people riding the public transport. So, you know, do we just go for the 18.4 and because obviously it hasn't affected our revenue.
Yeah, Mike, I
as in like a drop down in patronage, I mean.
I agree with you, Mike. I think that might be largely, I mean, this is just me speculating, due to the increased cost of living of everything else. That goes to my point earlier. You know, it's what people are prepared to pay is changing outside of this. And hence it looks like, I agree with you, that the patronage numbers that we didn't drop off. So the question is, where is that line? How do we keep an eye on it so that we make good decisions and have reasons for our decisions rather than plucking numbers and percentages out of the sky?
Yeah, no, I suppose that comes to your point about being agile about rather than, I think our current policy is what, 10% increases per year? If patronage numbers do drop off, like, do we revisit?
So your current resolution is that fares increase by the national level of indexation, which is the approach we've had previously, plus up to 5% to achieve the private share targets. So in year one, the 20% increase was a big step. Last year's 11% was indexation plus 5%. And then our proposal for 10% for the new financial year is because we were ahead and based on the indexation as it stood before the fuel crisis, not all of the 5% was required. So the 10% is effectively that for next year as things currently stand. So that's following the policy that you have. So that will achieve, well, the 10% increase will achieve the 18.4%. Is what I'm saying.
Yep. So we are on track to meet the agreed target of 18.4%.
Yes, and that was the basis on which we put the 10% increase in the annual plan process for you this year.
Councillor Smith.
If I've got this wrong, I apologise because I've come back into the conversation. But the reality is, at some stage, we have to step back and say we just can't keep going with a blanket increase across all fares. Because if you start out with a fare of $1 for children and $10 for adults, you add 10%. The differential actually grows. The gap between, it's like if you have a person on $100,000 and they get a 10% pay rise, and someone on 50,000, they get a 5,000. And if you keep doing that, the equity and relativity completely go out the door. So we need to have a complete reset on that and keep the relativity across those groups going forward. Really simple to put a percentage across everything, but it actually ends up distorting the equity.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think currently youth and adults pay the same fare anyway. There's just different levers through fare capping to provide some relief for different users. So we'll look at that a little bit later on. But yeah, I agree with the percentages. Never quite tells the whole story. Robbie. I know that was my point last week as well.
Mine's actually a weird question. I'll tell you. Mine's about the services that we've got too many services at times that we have inefficient buses on the road. And if you're working that out, if we got rid of some of those, we would reduce our costs by 10% as well. I just listen, and I know you've heard this story 4 or 5 years now. You sit in Morrinsville and there's one boat person going in a bus, in a 40-seater bus going to Morrinsville. If you work that out on the cost of running that bus and then you work it out on the days, on the cost of, that's mostly 5 or 10% of the cost of that day is running an inefficient bus. And at some stage, when are we going to talk about the monkey in the room and actually running an efficient bus service? Because we can actually run it a lot more efficient, and that cost that you're talking about are getting not increasing too much so you can still take the service. If you've got some of these inefficient buses out, those ones that are efficient would become a lot more efficient. So I don't understand. At some stage, we're going to have to talk about those services that are inefficient.
I'm going to add to your question, Andy, like what are the other options if you choose not to rely primarily on fare increases? That kind of was missing.
From a fares policy perspective, and that's quite a narrow lens to put on things, as the conversation today has highlighted, but the trade-offs are trying to get as much efficiency out of the current fare system as possible. So that's charging users different fares for different journeys, doing more of that, but also in terms of the subsidies that WRC provides to certain groups, for example, the peak period super gold concession and accessibility concessions, which are funded by WRC.
Right, so doing the policy review is really that process, and uniform is the key word in that question. I to Noel's point, I think that we talk too often in percentages, and I think we should use examples of actual absolute dollar values to sense check things. I mean, that's what councillors are here for, to sense check the real world stuff to the technical, the way things drift at times. So if we could do that as we go down the track with this process, that'd be really good. I think everyone can relate to that quite easily as well.
Yeah, good points. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Angela, I just wonder if it's possible for somebody to present us with a schedule of all the non-discretionary concessions that ratepayers are asked to contribute to the public transport system throughout the region, just so that we know what we're talking about in terms of dollar value. And,
yeah, that's in the slide coming up.
Who they're associated with.
It is in the slide.
Yep, that is coming. Andy, let's move it on.
Just further to that, Angela, just while you're there, are those concessions, because I'm reading this NZTA document here and trying to find out what's actually in private share and what's not on private share, and I would have thought some of those concessionary stuff is not part of our private share. So can we have clarification around what is in and what is out as well, please?
Ooh. Can you just talk a bit more? Like, what do you mean?
Yes, I'm just looking at here, which is straight off their website. It's saying what their private share is. So passenger fares, all fares received by passengers and third parties. So you're advertising like you highlighted before. But then outside of that, outside of private share is Super Gold Card, community connections and those sort of things. So, you know, I'm either reading it wrong, but I just want to know what's part of private share and what's not part of private share.
So I can speak to that. The only thing that is part of private share is the money that is collected through passengers through the fare box or through third parties third party revenue, such as through partner concessions with higher education institutes. Everything else, and which is why that number looks so big, comes from public subsidy from one source or another. Be it Super Gold funding, which comes through the Crown, be it through the National Land Transport Fund, which is administered by NZTA, or through rates.
So I believe the answer is that either the passenger pays or the company pays, and that's included in private share alongside advertising, etc. So it's not, we're not double dipping, say, by getting our bulk funding from Super Gold and applying that to our private share. Does that clarify things? We can.
I'll need to work it through a bit. Yeah.
Yep. We can pick it up a little bit later on.
Sorry to hold you up, but I was just wondering. I thought advertisement fell into that as well.
It does,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that before. And
no, I didn't include that. Sorry. And
was there like on Tahua we have the food and stuff?
Cafe revenue. Well? Andy mentioned that before.
Right. So I just didn't hear. Thank you.
Right. Moving on to the zones, which is where you're asking us to make some possible changes.
Yeah, overall, the zonal system seems to work quite well. It's obviously concentric bands through from Hamilton, but generally speaking, it's fairly easy to work out what fare you will pay based on that relatively simple map. Then there's the fare table itself. So how much do passengers get charged depending on how many zones they pass through in that zonal system? Modes, so whether we charge different fares according to the mode people use. So already a decision last week on Tahuya fares increasing by 25%, the fare table there. That's meant the fare table for Tahuya no longer aligns with the bus fare table. And also, I'll talk quite a bit about this is time of travel as well, whether we charge different prices according to when people travel. So there's some efficiencies that can be made there as well, potentially as well. So something that's missing from the, you could argue is missing from the current RPTP is some principles around pricing as you travel between fare zones. So the vast majority of travel, it will not surprise you to hear, is within the Hamilton zone, but passengers pay more depending on how many zones that they travel through. And to work out how many zones you travel through, you count the zone you're in plus the boundary of the zones that you're traveling through. So on that ring diagram, each ring represents +1 in terms of the zones you travel in the fare table there. There's some evidence looking at the distances that people travel compared to the number of zones that they're passing through, that perhaps in the middle of that fare table that the fares are a little bit lower than they could otherwise be. You would expect that there's a relatively straight line correlation between the number of zones travelled and the fare that people pay, but that is it's more of a dip in the middle at the moment. So my suggestion is that there's probably some principles in the next RPTP which guide the fare setting between zones. Hopefully that's not too controversial a suggestion.
Yeah, Andy, I think on that one, it would be helpful to have examples, real life examples. Say if somebody was travelling from Tokoroa to Hamilton, what the cost is and what they would pay. Yeah, just to put a few examples next to that, especially when we go to the PT subcommittee for the wider region as well. Yeah. And is it true that you move the bullseye depending on where you start? So it would be, say, Cambridge. Bullseye would start there if your journey started in Cambridge, and then you would jump 2 zones into Hamilton.
Yeah, and sorry, that was moving the bullseye.
You always start. You're always that.
Yeah, you always start with your journey starts. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Ben.
Oh, just you say there are no principles defined, and yet you're asking principles to be defined, and yet how did we get to the charges for as if there were no principles? How did you arrive at them?
Good question.
No, that is a good question, and it's not documented.
So there is some principle there. You haven't set out what it is.
I think it was where we started with to where we ended up. So we looked at the current fare settings as they were, and then went from there.
I was away with the ferry, sorry.
Yeah, it's clutching at straws. All right, Jen.
Thanks. No, Rick, I agree with the principles idea. I was just wondering, would having fewer zones in the name of simplicity go against what you're saying around efficiency? These things? That was one question. And the second one was, if we take into account the other parts of New Zealand, like the Bay of Plenty region and below in Auckland, is there a way we can structure the zones so it's less of a bullseye, but more of a way of working for future interregional travel that we might increase, which I think is been mentioned lots. Yeah, so just something to think about.
I think I just briefly, I just briefly respond to that. So the whole point of a fare system, a fare zoning system, is that it provides a degree of simplicity for the user.
I like the zoning.
And from that, there's obviously a degree of abstraction. You know, I was in Singapore recently, and they charge based on per kilometre travel, but that's actually extremely difficult for the user to work out how.
I like the zones. I was just wondering if there'd be less of them.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. some of the zones in the Waikato, as I say on this slide, they have very, very little or no travel between them.
We have no buses even stopping in some of the zones.
My suggestion
Well,
is
yeah.
that you could probably remove at least one, but probably two of those rings from the zonal fare structure without any impact on revenue.
It's good to understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Maguire.
Probably going to set myself up for a tar and feathering here, but if, oh God, the tar pot's just been filled. Here I say it, if looking at shall I say bums on seats to the north, if Te Huia was ceased, have you done a comparison of what the patronage of moving those passengers all onto buses and the more efficient use of the buses? No, we'll just, it's a comparison and saying compared with having two systems go that are both parallel and you're arguing over whether they're efficient, whether if just Te Huia was stopped and that emphasis was put on a better service with the buses that would be patronised fuller, what the cost would be and the savings and the efficiencies of it. Have you run the figures on that?
Look, I can comfortably say that would be out of scope for this exercise. I can ask Phil if he'd like to respond on that.
I might jump in. I suppose given our decision last week and Te Huia is now on its separate fare structure, that is a decision maybe early next year moving forward. I guess as well, we do have buses which do run north into Auckland at the moment. So that zonal picture will still remain for those buses.
It's more the buses to Pukekohe where people can connect with the every 20 minutes services, but giving service to areas that don't have.
Yeah, and I think you raised good points about North Waikato as well. Getting them connected, more connected to Pukekohe is really important, hence that relationship with Auckland as well. Yeah, but thank you. Let's move it on.
This slide might be slightly more controversial than the last, and I'm really looking forward to your thoughts on this. So, as I said earlier, Hamilton has about 80% of the patronage on the Waikato network, but we only have one zone plus a very small CBZ fare zone for Hamilton. In terms of differentiation between the cost of provision, you pay as much travelling from Fairfield, for example, to the CBD as you do to Rototuna currently. So the suggestion in this slide is around looking at an alternative to the CBD fare zone, which would create an inner and an outer zone for Hamilton. So you would pay more travelling from Rototuna, for example, to the CBD, because of the additional revenue that would generate. That may mean that fares are slightly lower overall. So the average fare would reduce because you're doing that price differentiation piece. But of course, that means that those living on the periphery of Hamilton pay more. If you live within the inner zone, and that would need to be developed, but you could imagine that might sort of align with the Hamilton Ring Road as a sort of natural boundary. It's good practice to align fare zones with natural boundaries. Travel within that zone might be cheaper on average. So really interested to get your feedback on that.
Cool. Thank you, Andy. I'll go to Ben, then Noel, then Jen.
My my question, a statement is the purpose of a bus network in a city is to bring people to work efficiently and cheaply. So why would you charge them more to come from the outer suburbs? Because otherwise they'll just use their car. I think this is why you have a bus network, so people can get around and go to work. So I think this other idea is just a theoretical nonsense, really. I mean, I don't support that.
Ben, would you support removing the grey inner CBD zone? I believe that was put in place because we did have the bus that.
We've got the Orbiter, haven't you?
No, there was a free bus
The
within
background for the
CBD.
CBD fare zone
Yeah.
was when the CBD there was a CBD shuttle which was a free service which did an orbit around the CBD, and that the money that was used, the revenue funding that was used for that got put into the Comet service instead as a paid service. So the origin of the CBD fare zone as it stands is very much linked to the CBD fare shuttle as it was at the time. But that CBD fare zone, the purpose of that isn't defined in policy. It's the journeys within the CBD fare zone are very short, typically 2 kilometres or less. And, you know, that's kind of walking and cycling distance for most people. And those that can't walk, cycle, do have access to concessions as well. Travel would be cheaper.
I assume that the city zone is very cheap compared with.
It's half the price, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I wouldn't start fiddling with that. I mean, you're either going to have, I mean, I would hate to think that people from Rotorua no longer felt they could get into town easily and cheaply, because why else do you have a bus network?
Yep, no, you raised some good points. And I think the CBD fare zone would need to be held in context of the concessions conversation. Yeah, otherwise if you remove the concessions, then people will have to walk huge distances or pay a large sum to travel a short distance. But keen to hear other people's thoughts as well. No.
Yeah, all of what Ben just said, absolutely daft idea. The fixed costs of a bus and all the other issues, to start differentiating between the outer and mid, I just don't see it. And you know, I go back a long time. Probably the last time I used a bus in Hamilton, I was a student, and it cost me 10 cents to get. It cost me 10 cents, I do believe, because it was a shiny coin from out Glenview way into the city. So, yeah, I just don't think it's worth trying to break it up, because you'll have idiotic behaviour of someone will walk 800 metres to get to a cheaper bus stop than actually getting on the one outside their place or just down the road, and away they go. So I think it's best left alone.
Thank you.
And one fare though.
No, I didn't say that.
As is, I think, status
I
quo.
think the status quo.
Status quo with the zones, but we're not talking dollar amounts at this stage. Yeah, I'm keen to hear from Jen.
Yeah, I think we should just push it as large as it can go. I mean, the simplicity of saying anywhere in Hamilton, because that's the boundary people have. And we do have a rapidly growing boundary. So, yeah, if you just knew, yeah, wherever I want to go in Hamilton, it's going to be $4, whatever it is, would be much more preferable to the experience I've just had a while back when it was like $6.80 if I get on there and $4 something if I get on further south. Like, yeah, I just think it would be nice to make these zones as large as possible.
I think you've got a clear steer on that one, but
Excellent.
Just wondering, Chris, if you have thought about the map on the, I know you've just been for your walk, but have you got any thoughts around in it or in outer Hamilton?
I just think.
Oh, just pop your light on. Yes.
To me, it's about distance travelled and number of stops, because time is where the cost is, because your drive is your biggest cost. So where you've got a higher frequency of stops, then probably you may need to extend your zone out in those areas. whereas where you've got direct routes, then they maybe need to be excluded from the zone. Cost of actually operating the bus during the direct route is less than where you've got a confluence of stops included in it. So that's the only comment I can make on it, Angie.
Okay.
Just common sense to me, where the costs lie, then the zones need to be tightened.
I'll go to Gary and then,
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I just think the conversation is muddled, to be honest. And, you know, what are we trying to achieve? Do you want to get people in city? Do you just want just people on bus? Then you make the fees free, you know, what's the objective? And so in some ways, I think we need to sort out the principle that you want. Do you want to just move people, or do you want cars off roads, or do you want to make it profitable? And we haven't defined a principle. I think we just go in, because we can go up to 100 different scenarios. And yeah, I just think this is awfully muddled at the moment. And I just want to get to what is a principle? What are we trying to actually achieve? People on seats, price recovery, what the hell?
I think all of the above. I am mindful that this is coming to Liz's committee as well. So that way the city can weigh in as well.
Look, Gary, your comments are right. And this is always a very complex and difficult subject, because it is all of the above, as Angela said. It's always a balance, and it's never easy to make these kind of decisions. But look, on the whole, I'm looking at these slides and thinking that the recovery, we're going in the right direction, and we just have to continue in the right direction. So I'm interested in how far do we need to go? Is Chris happy here? Because we've seen, you know, incremental increases already, and we've exceeded those targets. Do we need to be harsher? Do you want to? That's the conversation for today. So I haven't heard that yet. I feel like most of us are happy with the suggestions and the track and the agreements that have already been made. But if it's different, I need to know that now, because I need to exercise that with the regional councils in a week's time.
Thanks, Liz. Oh, Chris, you got some?
Well, I'm just responding, I guess, to Liz. I think we need to be looking at what the NZTA is setting as standards that we should be trying to achieve as close to those as possible. And I know we've got an exemption at the moment, but who's to know how long that's going to exist? And, you know, if we have to, I know we don't want to talk about fares at the moment. In terms of principles, I think we should, whatever we do in decision making, we need to have the document that Gary's printed out in mind as being aspirational as to where we should be heading. Whether it takes 2 years or 5 years, I don't know. That'll be dependent on Phil or whoever does the negotiations with NZTA, but that's where we have to be headed. So.
Yeah, and I guess to Jen's points before about being nimble enough in the future to respond to any possible central government policy shifts as well. I mean, we do know from history that GPSs can float around as well. So, yeah. Ben, then no, and then we'll need to move on because there's
Can we just go back to meeting private shared targets? It's about 3 or 4 slides back. Well, that one. It seemed to me that that's the answer.
Yep, and we are on track to meet those.
Well, we're actually exceeding them.
Yep. So yeah. I think it's.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, if we're exceeding them, we're doing better than we should do. So
exactly. Yeah. So I think we move on to the next one.
Where I'd like to come to is the super gold people on peak.
We're trying to get there. Ben. Yeah. No, anything new to add?
Yeah, I'm struggling still at the pace at which we're going, and don't jump on me just yet. The reality is, you know, what are we here for, and what is the purpose of public transport? If you're on the left or the right of the centre, whatever, the issue was public transport's the necessary evil of society to transport people to get from place A to place B, right? Where they don't have access to cars or they choose not to use cars. So it's here to stay.
Yes.
We can muck around quite a lot, and we are doing that in my view today. We're wasting a lot of time, and I'm not trying to add to it. But the reality is, can we just get on with it?
Please.
We're trying to.
Yeah, well.
So, I mean, how many more lights do we want on for this point, or shall we just move on? Anything new to add, people?
I'm just going to contrast, not to demonize public transport. I would sell my car in a heartbeat and use it every day of the week if I could. But I can't because it's currently pretty crap. Trying to make it better. Let's spend time on it to make it better.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
If we can speed through some of the things we might have already covered.
Okay, so couple of last things on optimization of the tariff structure. Do you charge people more depending on the mode of transport that they use? Te Huia is a substantially different product to bus. Council last week opted for a 25% fare increase for rail. Going into this piece, my question to you was going to be, do you want to have higher fares versus buses? But I suspect to a certain extent that question has already been answered by the council decision last week.
I think Flex would be the only one, but I believe you're coming to that.
Slide on that as well. So Flex, for those of you who don't know, Bus It On Demand, is a concept, but it's also a product in terms of the night service that it operates on Friday and Saturday night at the moment. For on-demand services and where services interact with fixed route services in general, my usual recommendation is to keep fares at parity with ordinary bus fares, because those services might be used as feeders. So you get an on-demand service and connect onto a bus service, but because Flex nighttime service does not overlap significantly with the operation of the bus network, the cost is also a premium. Drivers are paid a premium on that service for operating into the night. My suggestion for that service is to increase fares by a significant amount. That might be, I would suggest doing that as a staged approach, so not doubling them overnight, but certainly taking the approach that you want to increase fares by at least 25% per year, and then review how demand responds.
Yeah, you make some good points. I think Flex has been possibly exempt from some of the price increases so far. So I would be in agreement with your recommendations there, Ben.
Well, it's just we don't have the information about what is the current cost, what's our expenditure, how often does Nightflex go, what are its hours. So it's hard to make a decision if we don't have that information.
I appreciate that there's a lot to get through in this presentation. Obviously, the steer has been trying to get through it.
Well, can you come back with that information before we?
The fares are set the same as a one zone fare for Hamilton currently.
So $2.64.
CBD, basically.
Yep, and it runs what, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights from 4 or 5 p.m. through till
6 p.m. till 4 a.m. I believe.
Yes. So quite a premium service. You see them zipping around when the rugby's on. Very, very well used. But I think the price could increase.
Yeah.
Okay,
However,
so
you make the points around if it's being used during the daytime if we remove some coverage services, that those fares should remain consistent with the buses.
Correct.
So I agree with that. But sorry, Ben, I cut you
I'm
off.
just going to say, if you're going to seek to increase this, can we do that? Or do we have to wait till this land transport review? And if so, can we have something go back to the transport committee, specifically on Nightflex?
So timing, if we did want to increase Flex, as you say, in a staged approach?
It's probably a bit of a grey area as far as policy is concerned. I don't think that you would need a policy change to put up flares and Flex, but I think I would have to be guided by regional council colleagues on whether it's...
Okay, yeah, I'll Liz, and then I'll come to you, Catherine.
Yeah, look, I just want to support both what Angela and Ben, what you're saying. Flex, the premium product is the way of the future. This is what people want. They love that ability to be flexible and that corner to corner. So I really want to see this rolled out to the region. There are some of our our towns that, in particular Cambridge, desperate for it, really want it, and happy to pay their own way as well, just want the premium service. So support Ben what you're saying. Let's get some data around it. Let's do a little bit more work around it, and let's see if we can be more efficient in some of our new services.
And is it just night flex or flex in general?
We have been advocating for flex in general. We're on our technical 2 report for that. That's been coming. We've had 1 report, second one's coming through soon, I hope, Phil. But yeah, we've been advocating for a long time for something all day and night, but it's been highly successful as a trial here in the city in the evenings only, but I suspect it might be even the uptake of it might be really well patronised during the daytime.
Okay. So yeah, if we can take that as an action point to bring some data back around flex. Cool. All right. Do you have what you need for that one, Andy?
Yep, that's great. Cool. Okay, time of day based optimization. So there's a really important point at play here in terms of how can we optimize the existing tariff structure to get both more revenue and more passengers out of the system. One of the ways that you can do that is by charging differential prices depending on the time of day that people travel. So how does this work? Well, people tend to respond less to fare increases in the peaks compared to the off peaks. So as I talked about earlier, on average, if you increase fares by 10%, you expect 3.5% fewer trips from those paying fares. But that number actually changes quite a bit depending on what time of day you're looking at and whether you're looking at weekdays or weekends. So for peak travel, if you put up fares by 10%, you tend to actually, the evidence suggests that you only get a 2.6% reduction in demand compared to 3.5% on average. But at weekends, for example, that difference is much more significant. If you put up fares by 10%, you get a 5.3% reduction in patronage. So what does that mean? Well, the opposite is also true. If you decrease fares in the peaks, you only get a 2.6% increase. But if you decrease fares by 10%, you get a 5.3% increase at weekends. So by adjusting fares for the peaks and off peaks separately, what you can actually do is encourage more people to travel in the peaks, in the off peaks, and that comes at a lesser cost in terms of reduced patronage in the peaks. The benefit of this is that you can basically optimize the system to get more passengers for the same amount of fare revenue. This isn't something that's done widely in New Zealand, but Greater Wellington does it currently. And Bay of Plenty have also opted to do it as part of their recent fares review as well. Now, this does add some complexity to the system. So you'll basically be charged a different amount depending on when you decide to travel. Some benefits because it encourages more people to travel when the buses are less busy as opposed to when they're busier. That complexity, I wouldn't recommend doing that as well as fare capping, because trying to work out when you've hit the cap, traveling peak and off peak, it's just too complicated, I think, for most people to appreciate and respond to as users. But definitely is something that I think is worth looking at as part of this this fares review. It's also benefits users. Look, why does demand respond less during the peaks and more in the off peaks? Well, because people can make more discretionary journeys at the weekends and off peaks than they do than they can in the peaks. At weekends, you know, there's the choice of more social trips, shopping, retail, etc., etc. But there's also the question of car availability and things like that as well. People tend to be more constrained in the peaks. So interested in your feedback on that approach.
So I've got 4 lined up. Jen, Noel, Ben and Chris.
Hey, thanks. I'm absolutely opposed to it for public transport this time round. I think in 6 years we might be ready for that kind of complexity, but currently I think it's complexity for not much benefit. I could just get on board with weekends versus weekdays, personally. Like this is just as a bus user, not wanting to. We're just not there. So in 6 years, be happy to talk about. Really, really big fan of time of use charging for cars because of the obvious issue that we all live through at certain times of the day. There's lots of metal on the road, but yeah, let's just get people onto the buses rather than keep confusing them.
Yeah, good points, Jen. Without that bus priority as well, there's no advantage, perhaps. All right, Noel.
Why do we have public transport? To get people out of their cars and into buses, and therefore this to me is counterproductive. If you want people in buses, you want them there at peak times to cut down the congestion. So it's counterproductive to what we're actually trying to do. So can't support this at all. Oh, thank you.
Ben?
When we were looking at the Tahuya fares, they talked about this idea, but then ruled it out as being far too complex, even just for the train. So I wonder why you're suggesting this here. I'd support it for weekends. I think weekends is a logical step, or certainly could be looked at, but then I'd like you to explain rates capping, and you say it's incompatible with the two, so we haven't got to rates capping yet. Perhaps you can.
Fare capping.
Oh, we're going there. Yeah, definitely
we
going
will
there.
go there
Coming
if
on
we can.
red. So, but perhaps you can explain that.
Yep, we'll come to fare capping a little bit later on, but I've heard 3 against. Maybe yes for weekends. I've got Chris and then Warren, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Angela. I'd be interested in some feedback from those transport operators that are actually using the current system. Wellington and Tauranga, you suggested, because you know, we can sit here in a balloon and make decisions, but I'm a great believer in listening to what other people have. Has it worked or hasn't it worked? And that would be more in line with my thinking in terms of driving decision making than just sitting here and trying to work it out for ourselves. The other point, Andy, is that you mentioned it's a trade-off, supply and demand, and I understand where Noel's coming on from this, but with this 10% increase in fares, we get a 3.2% drop off in patronage. Is that happening at the moment, given the increases in costs of fuel on that? Because I would imagine that equation is going to change depending on the economic environment that the transport system is actually operating in. Is there any anecdotal evidence to suggest otherwise?
So I can't give you any anecdotal evidence, but I can say that in terms of the numbers, these are the numbers that NZTA recommend for their modelling purposes, part of the NZTA monetised benefits manual. So they are the gold standard in terms of forecasting approach in New Zealand, and they have been based on substantial sort of longitudinal studies from public transport authorities from New Zealand and elsewhere.
Maybe just to add to that, we have been reporting to you since the LTP was signed off in mid-24, a gradually declining patronage across the region's bus network. And that's a similar situation that all other regions in the country have been reporting up until March this year, when everything's gone absolutely ballistic. It's, well, question, there's been no money for new services in all of that time as a result of the current government policy statement, and fares have gone up. So yeah, maybe a piece of both.
Warren, then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm supportive of what Chris Hughes said, and I'm also supportive of this because this is the way the private sector operates. When you go on to intercity and that sort of thing, there's a time-based optimization. So they obviously do it for business reasons. And so it's something I think we should consider, and also looking at feedback from Greater Wellington and that sort of thing to actually understand how it plays out in the real world of public transport in that space. The other thing, just a comment around this, 10% increase in fees and 3.5% drop off in patronage. To me, don't put too much weight on it. I wouldn't imagine, as we've indicated, there's a lot of levers around that sort of thing. And to me, it would also not be linear, because as soon as you crank those prices up too high, you're going to get a far bigger drop off. So I wouldn't get too hung up in that space, but no, supportive of where this is going with more information.
Cool. And I guess alongside that information as well is what infrastructure they have to support their buses to move efficiently, bus lanes, etc., if that's possible. Yeah. Robbie, did you have anything?
Yeah, no, supportive of Warren just said then, but I'm an outskirt of coming into Hamilton every day, and where we need a fee is parents dropping kids off at colleges. That's where our traffic blockages are. And I don't know why we have adults dropping teenagers off at colleges on the way into Hamilton. Everywhere that happens, there's a traffic block. So we need some sort of fee to stop parents dropping teenagers off at colleges.
Put them on the bus. Liz.
So it's about providing incentives, I suppose, in that space. Anyway, just want to again support what Warren has said. I think that we are a mature country now, and we can adopt ourselves and adapt ourselves to different fares at different times of the day. I would expect to be paying less if I was, reach retirement age. I'd be expecting to pay less if I came in at lunchtime. I think that's probably perfectly reasonable.
Just wanted to add though, in your proposing this, they've said that if you can't do that and rates capping. So we're coming to rates capping, we need to understand that.
Fare capping. I think there's a limit on yeah. Cool. So we've kind of got 50-50, so we don't know where we sit.
Oh, I'm happy to explore more information on it, to the points Chris and Warren made. But to Robbie's point, I think we do need to keep addressing that for the city. And so there was the talk of how we get more partner businesses for those concessions. But alongside that, there's another topic that's not really come across the table much, which is how to get the schools to do their demand planning better. And I think that's where Hamilton City Council have advocated quite often to us to have in our transport team the capacity to boost that. So we do have a way, but we haven't talked about it very often. So we should do that at some point.
Yep, good points. All right, we move to rates. Oh no, fare capping.
All right, so I grouped concessions and fare capping in one category, and the reason for that is because of the way that Regional Council currently provides fare capping for youth as opposed to a flat rate concession product. The WRC has 3 schemes essentially over and above the national default concessionary fare scheme. So these are the accessibility concession, so not funded nationally. Free travel for Super Gold card holders in peak periods, but for bus only, not for rail. And then fare capping for youth and adults, with the fare cap for youth set much lower than for adults. As I said earlier, anything that departs from the national norm generally tends to need to be locally funded from rates. And Waikato doesn't align with the prevailing national approach to other councils in 2 major respects currently. So Waikato is unique in having a youth fare capping product instead of a flat rate discount for youth and young people. And also peak Super Gold discount also inconsistent with the prevailing regional tariff structure. Most other councils in New Zealand do not get a discount for Super Gold holders, Super Gold card holders in the peak. And again, there's some inconsistency there, and that have been available buses but not rail.
Madam Chair, can we just ask why we went with that youth capping instead of the flat rate, against the national trend? What's
I believe we used to have a youth fare, and then we made it all consistent that it was an adult fare, and the way to recognise the youth was to give them a lower fare cap to reward more frequent users.
So you're talking about like school kids going to, using it instead of going in parents' cars, like Rob said.
Yes.
And the flat rate, the flat rate cap, how does that look?
So there's no flat rate discount currently for youth. Elsewhere.
How would that look though? What's the flat rate cap? Sorry, my ignorance.
So that would be a percentage discount compared to the adult price, essentially.
Okay.
So if your date of birth falls within a certain range, when you register your NTS card or B card, then you will automatically be entitled to automatically be entitled to a percentage discount. But we don't do that in the Waikato at the moment. It's just
but that is done nationally though.
It's a varying percentages.
Thank you.
But it's something we could look at.
Yes.
It's an option.
Yeah.
I'll go to Chris, then Jen.
Thanks, Angela. Super Gold card holders, I think, should be treated the same as everybody else. I think we should follow the national standard on that. And that is also the thinking at Hamilton City, or the limited audience that I had at Hamilton City. And fair capping for youth and adults. I would favour what they've done in Auckland, where you've got you've got a sessional rate, you buy a month's travel, which is unlimited and use per person. But I would prefer the national approach rather than being a one-off that we seem to be at the moment. So, yeah. So I just want to get us aligned with the rest of the country, basically.
Jen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we should try and move more towards consistency with the rest of the country. Hence, the peak, the gold card becoming more consistent. The youth piece, I think a youth fare would make more sense than the capping, looking at that. But the one thing where I think that we are ahead of the country and we should keep is the accessibility +1. And we should advocate for that and let the powers that be work that one out. But I just think it was a really innovative and helpful thing to do for our community.
Thanks, Jen. Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Thanks, Andy. You know my feelings about the gold card, so I won't speak on that. But I feel very, very strongly that the intercity youth concession should not apply because it just, quite frankly, disrupts the schooling system in the out of town schools. So if you have it in within a town, that's fine, if that's what it comes to, but not between towns. Yeah. Or even between Matamata and Morrinsville or Takaroa and Patara.
To that, please.
Oh yeah, I've just got Ben first, then I'll come to you, Robbie.
I think what Keith is trying to say is ratepayers are subsidising educational trips to Hamilton. And what he's saying, I think, is that during the week, adults should be treated as children if they're coming all the way to Hamilton, and we should only have youth fairs on weekends coming from the regions to the city. That's what he's trying to say.
Ben.
Yeah.
And then I'll come to you, Tupper Online.
Yeah. So your heading there is fare capping versus lower fares. Where are the lower fares? Because as I understand it, the government is requiring us to keep increasing the fare target. So what lower fares are you proposing?
So the government is setting agreeing a revenue target with councils. They're not agreeing a fare increase target.
Yep.
Any money that is currently used to subsidise fare capping could notionally be allocated towards reducing the overall level of fares for everyone.
Right, so that's your next slide where you talk about the $1 million potentially. Yeah, okay. So well, when we get to that, I agree that Super Gold card holders shouldn't qualify for peak hours, because the whole idea is to have them to come in the off-peak hours rather than competing with current providers. I'd agree with Jen about keeping the accessibility. Uncertain about how we deal with the youth, because you actually want them to be able to get access to things. So do you have suggestions about which you prefer here?
My personal preference would probably be a percentage discount rather than fare capping. The reason for that is that the data shows that only about 12.6% of youth journeys are actually capped, which is quite a lot less than you would expect if children were travelling 5 days a week in both directions. So it suggests either that product is not well understood or well used, and the question really comes, well, actually, what are those youth using that travel for on the other days? Yeah, I mean, the other point here is that youth extends beyond school children as well. So there may be some card holders in the youth bracket that actually have part-time jobs or do part-time study. The problem with capping is that it only benefits those users who make a certain number of journeys per week. So it completely excludes, for example, somebody that travels to a place of study 3 days a week, or they might travel to a different destination the other couple of days a week, or not travel at all. They might have a part-time job doing which they don't need to use the bus for. So it really, I mean, I've said setting the cap level is problematic. It is problematic because where do you draw the line in terms of what the benefit is to the users in terms of how frequently they travel? And the problem with fare capping is that it's very much disadvantages those who travel only part-time.
But if we go to your system, we don't know the additional cost, because I agree it was only 12.6% currently capped, and you're going to suddenly give everyone who's youth a discount. How much does that cost?
My last bullet point is that
thank you, everyone.
My last bullet point is that Waikato Regional Council is currently getting quite a good deal in terms of the money they spend on youth capping at the moment, because only 12.6% of journeys are capped. It's only actually costing 12.6% of the revenue. Whereas if you implement a 25% fare discount, that's going to cost you probably nearer to 12%.
Yeah, so you're asking us to do something without telling us the actual numbers. So we need to get those coming through, yeah.
So hopefully that gets explored in the package, the packages at the end.
So, Robbie, did you have something else to add? No? Okay. Yep, agree. No. Agree with keeping the accessibility concession. I believe Bay of Plenty may have also taken that on board. So yeah, and I know within the accessibility concession community, they are advocating that this becomes a nationwide concession, because then there's predictability for users across all of New Zealand. So we will see where that ends up. As a parent who puts multiple children on buses to get to school within the city, I think a youth fare could be a fairer way to go. But of course, would love to see the data around what the impact of that would be. The fare capping doesn't quite come into play for a lot of people. But yeah, was there anything else you needed to know on that section, Andy?
Not particularly on the fare capping versus sorry.
Just before you move on, I think Phil's got some points to add, maybe around the age of a child.
Yeah, I'll touch on that. But just for your awareness, really, the national ticketing system is leading to a discussion on this issue, and the need for there to be consistency nationally as far as possible is a really important way of providing a clear offer to a customer, whether they're in Auckland or Wellington or here. So some of these things are set nationally, and where we are not doing them, it may well be that we are asked politely to agree with the national rules. There are other things like whether a child is 16 or 18, not consistent nationally. We don't have that issue because we have fare capping, but it's at 18, isn't it? I think, rather than 16. The other one is just to give you an example around tertiary. So there are some regions that have a concession for people who are a student, and I think every university in the country has campuses in multiple regions. So if one region has a 25% discount for a student and another region has a 50% discount, do you offer that at a university level or do you offer it at a regional level? If you are a student with Auckland University or Massey or wherever, and you go to another campus in another part of the country, would you expect to pay the same or not? So these are the types of conversations that are happening around how will national ticketing be structured to enable a consistent experience for people wherever they are in the country. So whether the rest of the country picks up an access concession, or whether we lose the ability to charge or to offer a free trip for a Supergold user at peak, the types of trade-offs that are coming at a national level, as well as the conversations that you have in this policy review.
All right. I've got Warren, Tipper online, Keith and Chris.
Just really quickly, and just with the youth side of things, are you aware of anything that actually shows that by getting kids onto buses, it actually builds that mentality that they'll use buses in later life? And if that's a rabbit hole, let's go down that another day. But I just wonder, look, when I grew up, I never used a bus, and it's not really in my DNA to use a bus. But I just wonder, is there a piece that we also need to keep in the back of our minds that, hey, this encourages behaviour? I know it comes down to a lot of things, efficiencies and service and affordability, but is there a piece around that or unknown?
Yeah, yes, it does. And but it's important that quickly that behaviour in earlier life doesn't lose momentum through a person's ongoing as they evolve to get older, they buy a car and they move to a different place and all the rest of it. So there's definitely behavioural changes that can be influenced in earlier life, but it's easy to lose that
situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Tipper.
No, Kate Poi. I'll put my comments in the chat. I'm fine.
Okay. Yep. Staff can take those on. Do you want me to read it out or?
No, Kate Poi.
Okay. Awesome. Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Just in terms of the accessibility concession, I wish Katarina was here because she could articulate the need of the more distant towns and that sort of thing, assessing services and that sort of thing. And I don't know, what a B car holder is or anything like that, but the issue of getting to, say, Thames Hospital or to the different hospitals is a major. But it's not only the hospitals; it's just services of shopping and that sort of thing. So I can't emphasise the need that we look at all the different people that need the services, and in that, is it the ratepayers that subsidise or is it the central government subsidise? I think we need to be articulating for those ratepayers that are missing out.
Thank you. Chris.
Thanks, Angela. Just on the school bus thing, if I can comment on that. Living on a farm, I had to catch a school bus to school high school every day, and I didn't enjoy the experience at all because it meant I had to miss out on the sports after school. So the sooner I got my licence, the better. It was much more appreciated. Anyway, and that's put me off buses for life. So that's why I don't catch the bus anymore. Not really. Phil, just going back to the comments you were making before about Gold Card, I noticed on the Kiwi Rail financials, they've got a summary at the bottom which has Gold Card contribution and also a university contribution. Can you explain to me where that fits in terms of whether it's private or public contribution?
Let me come back to you on that.
Thanks.
Robbie.
Going back to what Warren and Chris just spoke about, I've got a daughter that travelled to Hamilton consistently for 4 years on a bus. That child never wants to get on a bus ever again, just like Chris was saying. Buses has killed her for life. She won't even travel with her friends on the bus on the weekend service. Cars are her life now. So this is the reality of what happens in these rural areas. So thinking you're going to give cheap bus services to rural kids, subsidised, think it's going to make them use bus services for the rest of their life, it doesn't work. It just makes them hate them.
Well, just to clarify, was it a ministry funded school bus?
Yes. So I paid to Hamilton, I paid for myself, but the one coming from Morrinsville was a Hamilton service bus that was used like for the Hamilton boys coming to Hamilton boys and other schools in Hamilton. That's a service that we provide.
Thank you. No.
Yeah, just a comment that was made a few moments ago about rural areas and the likes, and I talk about the NIMBY type issues, and it's about demand. If you live in an area or choose to live in an area and a service is not provided, it's not guaranteed that you will get a service just because you stick your hand up. And sometimes we need to actually say no. And sometimes as a politician, the hardest thing is saying no. I don't have a problem with saying no quite often, but the reality is a lot of people don't know how to say no. If you choose to live in an area that's not serviced, don't expect the community to front up and pay for your service to come to your town, or community. So I just think it's about a balance. Yeah, we've got the main urban centres, connectivity between. Don't expect it to do an offshoot just to sort you out. So a comment was made before, and I just want to make sure that we're actually agreed that we're not here to create services.
Yeah, that's probably out of scope for today, but
well, it's just something that needs to be thought about, though.
yeah, we do need to move on. I've got Gary and Gary, and then we'll move on.
So Noel, I sort of agree. And, you know, when I look at the fare capping, the concessions and all these other things, you know, it's whether you got a glass half full or a glass half empty. And I think I look at what Liz is talking about with Flex and what I understand around that. The problem with government organisations, I suppose, you have a model and you want people to fit the model rather than trying to find out what is the service that's required. And people will pay for a service if you put a proper service on. And that person up that rural road, Noel, if they deem it to be value for money, they'll pay for somebody on a Flex or a bus to pick them up or a taxi to take them in. People will pay. So, you know, so I think we need to look broader at, you know, at the service that's actually provided and how we charge for that service. So that's all your peak rate stuff, you know, and what it is in providing quality service. The point that I'd really like to have here as well is I think this whole 6-year review, and we're talking about stuff and setting policies and stuff, you know, for going around, I really believe the technology is going to change far faster than that around flexibility, time, you know, what you pay for, when you pay for it, how you pay for it. And that you'll walk on even with your Flex card and everything else, and it might be $10 and it might be $2, depending on what you do, where you do it, and why you do it. And so I think that our reviews are too slow, and we're gonna lock ourselves into something far too long because we're going to be things are going to pass us. So, so you know, I believe in the market, and I believe we should be far more market orientated, and then we'll provide the service.
Thanks. I've just had another 2 or 3 lights come on, and we do need to get to the next bit. So let's hold our questions and comments for now, and we'll truck on. And
My
if you could come
question
back at the end.
is relating to this one. We, in a diagram you gave us, usage by user group, I haven't seen that slide. Where you break down the number of adult use Super Gold offshore, the number of people who are in it.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
sorry. So
was there.
it's probably just a matter of
one.
looking at the numbers on. Which one was this?
No, it's only just one back before where you were.
That one.
That one.
That one. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask questions about that.
Okay.
So you've got the adults here. So there's 49,000 unique cards doing $1.2 million, 1.2 million journeys.
Yep.
Now, in the graph earlier on the beginning, there's only 1.01 million bus trips taken in the last year. So how come those are quarterly numbers, are they?
So is that a quarter?
Is this a quarter or is this a year or?
That's for a full year.
That's for a full year.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got Super Gold off peak is a large number, 420,000. Super Gold peak is 86,000. So that's the one I'm recommending we eliminate. We've got Community Connect and accessibility, and Community Connect also has partner. Interestingly, partners, there are more partners traveling than there are Community Connect people. How is that, given that they're supposed to have a partner traveling with them?
The partner, sorry, is it's the way I've named it. Those are concessions that have been worked through with organisations like Wintec and the likes. So it's where those organisations are part funding those people's travel.
Okay, so there's not an anomaly sitting in there. Okay, so Community Connect and accessibility, are they one and the same thing when we get to the next group? Can you explain the difference here?
So Community Connect is a concession which is nationally funded. It's available to anyone holding a community services card. There are some income thresholds that entitle you to having a community services card. You need to be in receipt of certain benefits, etc. But the eligibility is essentially determined by central government. The accessibility concession is strictly defined as a concession which is available to Waikato residents, and it's the eligibility is for those who have an impairment, which means that they cannot drive.
And they can also bring a partner with them. So is the partner here?
It is included in the accessibility line, but that number is quite small compared to the overall total.
So just to clarify,
it's called a +1 rather than a partner.
Okay, so the partner with Community Connect, what does the partner mean there?
So no, I think Andy explained that the line item, the partner, is those organisations who partner with us.
Right, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, business concession or tertiary concessions. Cool. Anything else, Ben? Cool. Let's go carry on.
So that's just a summary of the concession costs, revenue foregone costs that Waikato's currently funding outside of the national schemes. So these are direct revenue costs to Waikato ratepayers, as opposed to concessionary schemes like Super Gold, Off-Peak, and the Community Services Connect card. It's quite challenging to calculate exact numbers for revenue foregone, because not all of the people that are making those journeys on free cards would have otherwise have made them. So we're assuming here that a proportion of that total would have otherwise made a journey and paid for it. So that's where the cost component comes from.
Oh, I've got Noel then, Ben.
So that $1 million, 955,000, 100,000, is that paid for by adults or whomever? Who picks up that shortfall? That concession.
Ratepayer.
Just the ratepayers.
And fair pay, oh, and fair.
So
pay,
who's,
fair payers.
of the fair payers, who picks up the majority of it?
Adults. Of the fair payers would
Yeah.
be the adult. Well,
Well,
no, it depends how it's.
it depends on the total amount of revenue that's gained from each
So the
group.
reality
But
is-
everybody that pays a fare is essentially providing some degree of cross subsidy.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Ben.
So just to clarify, so if you remove the super gold peak period concession,
Yep.
you may not save 155,000 because they might all go free off peak. They'd simply shift their travel.
I've assumed that a roughly half of them would otherwise not pay.
Okay, so we're
So
not
that-
saving.
No, those are the figures with that assumption built in, the kind of worst case in that respect.
I agree with the accessibility concession, but when it comes to the fare capping adults and youth, you've indicated that if we shifted the system to actually do a 25 or 50% discount, it might even cost more than that. So you're not actually going to save that money.
No,
You're not saying getting rid of that, are you? If you got rid of that, you're going to have an alternative system, or are you simply going to charge them full fare?
I'm not proposing anything with that table. That's just setting out how much the revenue foregone for those particular
Well, it
concessions.
does, because
is.
it suggests you could save 10%, $1 million. I mean, the line below suggests, almost indicates if you did all those savings, you could save $1 million.
It also says that the figures presented just to illustrate the
I know,
trade-offs.
I'm just, yeah, thank you.
Jen.
It's all good. I was kind of going down the same track as Ben, but my understanding is we've kind of landed somewhere where only the accessibility one would remain based on the discussion we've had, and the other three, the trend of the conversation has been to forego those, which may have impacts on the fair one, depending on the percentage of the discount you might come up with, which may be from us, or it might be trying to be consistent with central everybody. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Moving on.
Good. Conscious of time, so I think I'll move into the packages. So look, as part of this fares review, there's a huge number of little tweaks and bigger changes that could be made to the fare structure. What we've tried to do is to combine some of those changes into some themed directions to get some feedback from you. And the benefit of this is that it helps compare the trade-offs rather than provide a long list of menu items and say this is going to cost such and such, but some options might be in conflict to each other as well. So what we've tried to do is simplify that discussion a bit. And look, the packages that I present to you are not going to be the final product. So I'm interested in both your sort of feedback on the sort of broad direction that you want to go into, but also anything that you'd like to sort of see changed in those packages. And know that we'll be taking this forward to the PT subcommittee in a few weeks' time. So some refined versions of these packages. Sorry, Angela, you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I'm just wondering if you go to the orange table where it contrasts them, if that is helpful.
Yeah. So I've put together some options based on some themes. So an equity package. So that looks at maintaining much of the existing framework of concession products. A customer emphasis package. So this is really designed to be a simplified version of what we've got already, but a balance between increasing patronage and the emphasis on equity. And an optimization package, which is designed to basically wring as much patronage out of the system for the same amount of revenue. And look, a really important point here is that each of these packages has been designed to generate the same amount of revenue. So the figures in each column assume that the same amount of revenue would be generated for that package. And the implication of that is traded off through the average fare, which you'll see at the top. And some of these packages perform better than others, as you might expect, but really important to understand that essentially they all generate the same amount of revenue for regional council, and to that extent they all deliver on the agreed targets with NZTA.
Is that a fair assumption that it's to generate the same income? Shouldn't we be looking to increase the fare revenue? So therefore, is it a proper assumption that we're looking to maintain the level of current funding? I just think that may be a dangerous thing to have done.
So whichever, remember this is a policy review. We're not setting fare levels. So this is the fare policy components that we're looking at. And I provided average fares so that you can see what the difference to the average fare level to generate the same amount of revenue would be. But I haven't put any absolute numbers in there in terms of fare levels. So the fare levels will get determined through the annual plan process, the LTP process, and through those discussions, there can be a view taken as to whether fares should be higher or lower, perhaps to generate more or less revenue to meet the agreed NZTA targets.
Okay. Just had a question before you go, Phil, about public consultation. Like, when will we ask the users and non-users and everyone else about this? So what's part of the process?
So once we've done these workshops with yourselves and the RTC-PT subcommittee, then we'll refine a proposed package, which we'll then go out to consultation for roughly September, October this year, for hopeful decision on the final preferred policy direction, December-ish.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Could we shift to the yellow, orange?
Yes, orange table. Oh, was it blue? Changed. Yep. So if we can have some discussion around this, and then we will look to move on. So I've got Chris starting us off.
Yeah, look, Madam Chair, I'm totally with Noel on this. I would have expected, and you can't separate this. As long as Andy wants to try and enforce to us that we can separate, I think the fare package is critical to the whole thing, because that really, to me, is what you do when you look at optimisation. So you maximise the benefits for both parties, and that's what I would have expected to see the optimised package to do. So you're offering a comprehensive range of services, but you're charging for them, and that's why I fully support Flex and increasing it. That's why I want us to go to an Uber system. We haven't discussed that at all, because I still think that there is a lot of mileage to be made out of breaking this, particularly in Hamilton City, down into component parts and providing a unique service that's going to benefit the user of the service. And it's, in itself, it will attract new patrons to maybe then link into the express services that we offer. So, yeah, look, as far as I'm concerned, that should be part of our policy. And I can't see how you can separate the fares from policy, to be quite honest.
Yeah, thank you. Ben.
Yeah, I agree with those points, but I think when you look here, each of these, equity has a -6.4, customer 0.9, and optimization 7.3. So all of them are seeing a reduction in fares. But I don't think we're actually at this stage yet. You've removed Super Gold Peak. That's the one thing I can see consistently through there that has disappeared. But you're actually talking with optimization, no fare capping or discount. So that's a huge impact on youth and anyone else. And so we're being led down that path because it appears to reduce the fares. I'm just saying that I think we're too soon. I think this would be good to redo this table as a result of the discussions we've had today, to relook at where this is at, and possibly also include that idea of current fare level and reducing fares by 10%, or increasing fare revenue by 10%. So yeah, I don't think we're at the stage to actually make a decision on these, picking one of these three.
Yeah, are we able to pick and mix?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So what do we like? What do we don't like?
Yep.
So we've heard pretty consistently that
absolutely no
peak-
intention to lead you down any particular path. The intention really just to present the trade-offs and provide a basis for discussion.
So we've heard pretty consistently that the peak super gold, we'd like to be nationally consistent with that one. We need to know more about consistent age of a child and youth fares. Majority of people have an age of a child and a discounted rate for a youth. Noel, I'll go to you.
I'm concerned. I haven't seen the figures that tell me that 6.4 and 6.7 is accurate. I'd like to understand the business case or the analysis behind that some more. The greatest respect in public transport over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen some figures that we've had to go back and relook at. So rather than progressing on the basis that these are correct, I'd like to see the analysis that gives us some confidence in those figures, please.
Yeah, and just with the optimization, we're replacing the CDB zone with the Hamilton Inner Zone. Well, I think we kind of reached an earlier year. So there's a whole lot of things we've talked through that are presumed in here. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm guessing we can do that for the RTC discussion, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that'll keep having iterations of this going through there. This conversation will be reflected at RTC.
Sounds good. I'll go to Warren.
Yeah, just looking at the next slide, which is the user cost impacts for the different types of passengers. Yeah, that one and that, but probably the missing bit is what would cost, shift worker Steve now currently, is there a, so we've seen his fare go up from $100 up to 160 or what, can't read at that distance, but we've got no baseline. So to understand the different, equity optimization piece, it would be nice to know the baseline, which I think will then come back to that percentage figure and help justify to know where that 6.5 or 4.5. Yeah.
And for me, like I said at the beginning, it's always going to be, if we're going to talk fair amounts, it's relative to using your car. If you take the total cost of ownership of that into account, just making sure that staying below that.
Okay. I think we've had a really good conversation. Keith.
Yeah, just my ignorance. Is there a bit of software you can just plug all that stuff in and play with it or not?
Plug all what stuff's in, sorry.
Well, if you play with it all and adjust it.
There's a model, there's quite a comprehensive spreadsheet model that sits behind this, so I can just plug different assumptions in. Yeah,
that'd be good to see some options in that. Yeah.
Just in terms of the three broad pathways do we think we can maybe narrow that down to 2 or even 1 for
that's where
the next stage, or
that's where the other slides were, I think, a bit more useful, where we're going to explain what's in each rather than the table, because the table, to Ben's point, it's changed a bit. Whereas what do you like, what do you not like, was in bullet points under each one. So if you wanted to, we could run through that if it's helpful.
Well, I guess that was kind of the thought I had is do you want to see proposed packages, or would you like to see tables that pull together the incremental discussion points and decisions that you make along the way? Is it whichever way you do it, there'll be what that will identify is where there is a consequence on a particular user group or a particular journey type.
I thought it was good the way you tried to do both. It's just that so much changed along the way that it's hard to now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure yet we're going to get down to one or two or three, well, one or two options, given the views in the room. Gary,
Yes,
Raymer.
yes, and all, I think, I do think you could narrow it down a fraction, you know, from the equity. So it's about, so I suppose I agree with you, first premise units around total revenue and what's our base and everything else and where we're going to go from. Do we want to increase that? So really it's around, I suppose we've tried to drive the whole day, and from my perspective, is around customer emphasis and optimization. And it's around service and everything else. So, you know, so I think for me, it is still around, it's around service. So customer emphasis and optimization, but base underlying that is what is the level of revenue we want to achieve, or what's the cost recovery we want to achieve on that. And we don't have that base figure. So that's the starting point, I think.
And I'd agree with you on the two right-hand columns.
Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I think we actually need dollars. We need to know how much it's costing so far, what it's going to cost with each of these rather than just your percentages. And there are things in here. So we've agreed, as I see it, accessibility at 100% remains. But when it comes to the youth capping, what does a 25 to 50% discount mean? It may cost more than the current system. So we need to know that figure. And also, you're talking down here about recalibrating the bus fare table based on time travelled. That's not what we actually talked about for Hamilton, for example. So there's factors here that need to move around.
That's probably just a reference issue with regards to the time travel. That was more to do with my slide around the interzonal travel and the current fare table perhaps being a bit light in terms of that kind of middle range distance rather than the Hamilton, which is explicitly talked about in the zonal structure. But yeah, I think it's good feedback.
I think generally the idea of average fare being percentage wise, it would be more useful to know what is the overall cost to the council, for example, how much is reduced, and then, as some of them have been talking, what does a 10% increase mean?
It's yeah, I mean in terms of the way that the information is presented there, each of those packages is designed to generate the same amount of revenue for council. So that's the same cost investment for council. The trade-off is against the average fares that users pay, whether they're higher or lower.
From what your experience is, can we simplify what we're going to hear to be able to make decisions based on your Phil?
So you're asking what the next steps are?
Well,
bringing it back.
I mean,
So
are you comfortable with the average fare being a percentage up or down? Or I think Gary and Co are saying what is the actual dollar figures that we're looking at overall, and are they increasing or decreasing?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty small percentages compared to what the actual cost is. But happy for Phil to take
my
over.
suggestion would be almost to turn that on its head and say, this is what you want to do with accessibility, this is what you want to do with Supercard, this is what you want to do with time of travel or fare zones. And then at the end of that, what does that do to fare? And then you can make have a discussion about whether that gets us to the private share vision or beyond or lower than that, and what that means for everybody else. So maybe we'll keep working on this. We will be bringing this. Oh, you probably want to talk about next steps. I won't talk on your behalf. The next stage of discussion here, we'll pick up all of the things that you've said. I'll let the team describe how we're going to do that.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the next step, the intention was always, like we're doing now, getting feedback of what the preferences would be for each potential policy change from yourselves and then the RTCPT subcommittee. And then depending on how similar or not the different recommendations were, bringing forward an aligned package, or two, if need be, for endorsement to then consult on that. And then through the consultation process, there might be changes that may need to, be reconsidered and things, and then bring a decision through for recommendation. So I guess there is work that we could redo or build on this and bring further information to the next meetings in September or August, which would then endorse us for consultation. Yeah, just noting that if there are delays in that process, or then the delays on consultation and decision affect the critical path with NTS. So that is just the wider timeframe we're trying to keep in mind.
I think Phil suggested correctly, it should, the steps we've taken and then the conclusion rather than.
All right. It looks like we got everything we need from today, Andy.
Yep, that's good. Good feedback. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Warren.
Yeah, can I just quickly, Liz, is your gut that RTC is over this far more than obviously the councillors around this table?
Not necessarily,
No.
because we have some new members as well. But look, again, this is a complex thing, so we're going to have to work through it relatively slowly. I think I think the fact that we need some numbers would perhaps be a little more helpful. Percentages are difficult because we just don't really.
Yeah, well, that's what I was sort of
we're
trying
going
to get. Yeah. Is there more information to take to RTC from the questions today that might be helpful?
I'm hoping that we can have some
in that space. That's all.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds good. And that's next week, isn't it, Liz? Monday.
No, that's the committee. The workshop for this is separate, isn't it, LJ? So yeah, the workshop
right.
on this with the PT subcommittee is on the 15th. So we've got plenty of
Couple
time
of weeks.
to make sure that it's focused on. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. That's us. All right.
Thank you very
Finished early. Lunch. Next workshop will start at 1.